Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Chris, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I customize my study wall to go from this to this. And over time, I will share more videos about how I customize the multiboard files, made my own multiboard clips for hanging and for other uses. But in this video, we're going to focus on the installation. So let me talk you through it. So it all started with an idea. I've been fortunate enough to build our own house and set aside some space for my own home studio. And I've always had the intention to do something cool with this wall. I just didn't know what. Earlier last year, I managed to get myself a BambuLab 3D printer. And as I would spend some time researching online, I came across a system called Multiboard. Now, Multiboard, as you can see here, is a full library of parts, including tiles, snaps, and accessories, all set up and created by Jonathan, also known as Keep Making on YouTube. So shout out to Jonathan, and thanks for setting up this community here. I do intend to share what I create openly once I get around to it. So I had the space, and as you can see, I'd already managed to check my measurements. I obviously have the full house catted up in SolidWorks. So it was a matter of working out the exact space that I had and then what parts I would need. But I wasn't going to settle with just downloading and sending parts straight to the printer. I wanted to make sure that what I was printing was going to be customized exactly to my requirements. So to start off, I went through the process of downloading a couple of the files and then opening them in SolidWorks to see just what kind of editing I could do with them. Of course, there's no native SolidWorks files, so I did have to do some rebuilding of my own. And in another video, I will take you through that process. The main thing that I was trying to do by creating my own files was make it so that I didn't have to handle multiple different models in my assembly and actually use everything from the one part and reference configuration. But what I quickly discovered once I started to pattern this part in the space was that the amount of detail required in these parts and the pattern features was just making the whole file unbearably slow. So it was that point that I changed my direction. I suppressed a lot of the files that I had in my pattern, and I then started with a simple sketch to block out each of those tiles to work out exactly how many I would need on the wall and to what size. You can see here what I was working at is what kind of spacing I would have between these squares on the edges. So the panels are at 25mm spacings, and my wall is not a perfect size to fit to a 25mm spacing. So I was going to have some clearance somewhere, and you can see under the windowsill as well. I was going to have to deal with that. So the sketch was all about just setting up that area and giving me a bit of an idea about how many of these panels I would have to end up printing. Now we're going to move quickly through some of the next steps in CAD at least, but I just want to show you the full process so you understand, my thinking. I was smart enough, I think, to take some photos of the construction when it was happening of the house. So I had actually a good reference of where the studs were in the wall just from the photos, even before the use of a stud finder, which I did double check later to make sure that I'll be screwing these panels in. So the multi-board panels can stand off on the wall, but I had a look through the options and decided I probably don't want to put any pegboard hangers into this. All I want to do is screw directly to the wall and make it as strong as possible. So here what I'm doing is just checking the alignment of the holes of those studs to make sure that I could use the actual holes that are in those panels to screw into the studs. Now, not every panel is going to screw into a stud, but I figured if I could get, every second panel with a screw that's going through the plaster into a stud, that's going to make the whole thing a lot stronger. In the end, I probably overkilled it a bit, but look, I'm not too fast and looks really solid now. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that process. But if you were taking this on yourself, you could probably back off a little bit on the drilling and the screwing. So at this point, I modeled those studs in, I'd measured them against the wall, I'd checked the space, and now what I was doing was updating my pattern of the tiles to make sure I had suitable clearances from the cabinetry that's on the wall, and from the side walls itself. Last thing I want to do is print too many panels or have it not fit. Once I got in there and had everything done accurately, so I've put in some, not custom size panels, but some panels that weren't 9x9, they might have been 9x8 or 9x7. I got the spacing right and I was able to get pretty even spacing around the whole of the wall, right up to underneath the windowsill. Now what you can see here is me looking at snaps that I was going to use. So to hold a lot of this panel together, I was going to use screws where I could to go into the studs. If I didn't have a stud, I was going to use wall plugs. So you drill a slightly larger hole, put a wall plug into the plaster, and then the screw can go into that wall plug. Here, so I'm showing you all those quad snaps, which are for all the corners, because one of the things I'm working out here is exactly how many of these panels I need to print. I did discover pretty early that the printer bed can only print a 9x9 panel. So the majority of my panels that I was printing and setting up were 9x9. There's all the other areas, and like the edges and the top edge, where I had to do some custom ones, okay, slightly smaller. So I used SolidWorks here, the drawings and the bill of materials tool to actually count up how many of those panels I was going to need. And if we pause for a second on that, I think I was going to need about 39 of the main panel, maybe 13 of one of the ones around the edge. It was quite a lot of pieces. It was going to be around 8 kilos of filament. So that's about 8 rolls. I decided to use a matte white PLA. I used BambuLab stuff. So once I had my print list sorted out, I had all my files downloaded, it was time to start printing. And there was a lot of printing. I did a few trial runs first just to make sure I could get some consistency. What I found very early on was just using the default spread of the printer, I wasn't getting great adhesion to the bed. So I'd find a lot of failed prints just usually on the first 1 or 2 layers. But once I slowed down those first layer passes, so it had a solid base to then print on and build up, it was pretty good. I was getting pretty consistent results. And here I'm just counting up the panels and setting everything out, making sure that I'm checking off my list. So I've got everything ready to go. It took me maybe 2 weeks of just printing, usually a couple of panels a day. Multiboard does offer this print option to do like a multi-stack, so printing multiple stacks in one print. I just thought it was too risky. I'd just rather de-risk it and do one at a time. So now getting ready for the installation, I'm just double checking which panels go where. So even though I had the quantities, I hadn't quite set out in that drawing which panel went to which position. So all the white panels you can see, they're the normal 9x9 size. They're the ones that I printed the most quantity of. Everything else that was colored was a specialty panel that I only printed a couple of. So my thought process at this time was, let's check everything fits and see how it's all going to click together and what kind of strength we're going to get. So I put together my first couple of panels and I started assembling the clips. And it held together surprisingly strong. I was quite happy with that. And the size looked pretty good to fit in that middle section. So we went for a couple more panels. I wouldn't know till later, but this is probably not the best way to go about it. The main reason being, because I'm going to drill holes in the wall, I need to mark all those positions. But you can't really, if you've got the whole thing assembled and then the wall, you can't get your wall plugs in the right positions to get everything on. So here I was discovering the limitations of my quick modeling. I knew the PowerPoint was roughly in this position on the wall, but I hadn't modeled it perfectly. And I figured I'd just cut around it. Now, luckily, I just got one of those panels to fit right up against the edge. So that did save me some reprinting, but I did have to reprint this top panel because it was interfering with the top of that little cabinet you could see. Otherwise, the spacing on the left and the right was pretty good. So I doubled down on my strategy here, and I kept going to assemble more of the panels to do the next row, the one that would go the full width of the wall from left to right. And I think this is actually 11 panels wide. So you can see I've got 4 there on the left. There's a couple more on the middle and another 4 on the right side. So once I reached the point where I had the whole wall set up, just roughly or loosely holding its own weight and position, I could see that I needed to lift the entire panel about 10 or 15 millimeters off the bench tops to get a nice consistent spacing between the bench top and the underside of the window. So I decided to go ahead and print these little wall spacers. The first one I printed was a bit loose. So I tightened that up on the next one and then printed 4 more. And what these did was actually create a nice little space for the wall brackets to sit on while I then marked the position of the screws and was able to go out and drill the holes. Oh no, how am I going to screw this to the wall? So here I started marking out some holes for drilling. These are going to be holes on studs and also some of the holes in between the studs where I'd put a wall plug in and then add a screw afterwards. And it's always nice to get a friendly visitor. So now it's time to pull it all apart and then start screwing it panel by panel. First, a test panel. Let's mark it with some tape and get the drill out to put those first holes in. Now that we'd finished the main panels, you can see here the difficulty I was actually getting into. So somewhere along the way, panels had started twisting, and as I was putting the screws in, the spacing just wasn't even. In the end, I just had to brute force it. So I probably flexed panels as much as I could, got the screws in, and they've held. So I'd say they're under a fair bit of tension to the wall, but they are sitting there and they have settled nicely. The last steps in assembly was fixing up the bottom section, where I had to design and print a few more panels to fit around the power points and fit around the edge of the bench top on the right side. For these panels, I used a lot less screws and I relied a lot more on the clips and just a couple of screws in the corners to hold those panels in place. Fitting these last two panels around the power points was incredibly satisfying. And then finishing them all off with the dual snaps all the way around was a nice little touch. I'm still unsure whether or not I will create a border around the whole thing, but we'll see. I've got plenty of time to get to that kind of thing in the future. So there's the finished product. Now, I've started adding a couple of attachments. I've still got plenty to go, where I'm using a multiboard snap as a template part and then some sort of attachment to that snap, whether that be to hold the off-road buggy, okay, or I've done a couple of frame clips up here. I've got a custom iPhone 16 or iPhone 15 Pro phone case holder to hold my Oscar Piastri Melbourne GP quad lock case. So plenty of more accessories to come. Also, you know, I've done the logo and the light bracket holders there. I'll probably show those in another video coming up. But yeah, lots of possibilities here. So yeah, very excited to tinker with this and change this in the future as I go and bring you along on the journey. Thank you so much for watching. Please check out my Lego series for the off-road buggy. I'm sure you'll find something useful in that. Otherwise, see you in the next one. Bye.